No distress call came. That was the first thing that made Earth Command uneasy. Colony Epsilon 9 was not important by galactic standards. It sat far from the busy trade lanes, on the cold edge of explored space. A mining world. Harsh weather. Thin atmosphere. But it was human. That was enough. Every 7 days, like clockwork, the colony sent a status report. Nothing special, just numbers, system checks, a few personal messages attached at the end. Routine. Predictable. Safe. But this time, nothing came. At first, no one worried. Delays happened all the time in deep space. Solar interference. Relay errors. Equipment faults. It was normal. 12 hours passed. Still nothing. 24 hours. Now it was unusual. By the second day, Command flagged it as a priority. A simple probe was dispatched. Fast, automated, and reliable. It would jump to the system, scan, and return within hours. It never came back. That was when the room went silent. No one spoke, but everyone felt it. That quiet, creeping sense that something was wrong. Not broken. Not delayed. Wrong. A long-range scan was ordered next. Slower. Less accurate. But safer. It took time. Too much time. When the data finally arrived, no one at Earth Command moved for several seconds. They just stared. Epsilon 9 wasn't there. Or rather, it was, but not in any way that made sense. The colony's orbital stations were gone. Not damaged, gone. Reduced to scattered debris drifting in slow, lifeless patterns. The surface was worse. Where there had once been cities, there were only blackened scars. Huge impact zones. Melted ground. Entire regions turned to glass. No heat signatures. No communications. No signs of life. 200,000 people. Erased. Someone whispered, "It's a mistake." But it wasn't. Then the scan picked up something else. Movement. Far above the ruined world, beyond the debris field, something waited. A fleet. Not human. The ships were massive, far larger than anything Epsilon 9 could have defended against. Their design was sharp, angular, almost unnatural. They held position in perfect silence, like predators that had already finished feeding. Watching. Waiting. And they hadn't left. That was the part that chilled everyone the most. If this had been an accident, they would have gone. If this had been war, there would have been a battle. But this was something else. This was a message. Back on Earth, the command center remained silent for a long time. No shouting. No panic. Just quiet. Cold, controlled quiet. Finally, the admiral in charge spoke, his voice steady, but heavy. "Confirm casualties." A pause. Then the answer came, soft and final. 0 survivors. No one reacted outwardly. No anger. No shock. But something changed in that room. Something deep. Because humanity could forgive many things. Mistakes. Misunderstandings. Even war. But this? This wasn't war. This was extermination. And somewhere, far beyond that ruined colony, something had just made the worst mistake of its existence. The alien fleet did not advance. They did not retreat either. They stayed exactly where they were, hovering above the ruins of Epsilon 9, silent and unmoving, as if the destruction below them meant nothing at all. For several long hours, Earth Command watched. Every sensor was focused on that system. Every signal analyzed. Every movement tracked. But the fleet did nothing. Then, a transmission came. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't encrypted. It didn't even try to mask its origin. It was meant to be seen. The signal cut through human channels with ease, overriding civilian networks, military relays, and deep space communications all at once. Screens across Earth flickered. Control rooms, offices, even personal devices. And then the message appeared. Simple text. No symbols. No alien language. Perfect, fluent English. Colony removed. A pause. Expansion beyond permitted zone will not be tolerated. That was all. No introduction. No warning. No attempt at diplomacy. Just a statement. Cold. Final. Absolute. For a moment, the entire planet seemed to stop. Billions of people read the same words at the same time, and no one understood how to react. Across the wider galaxy, however, the reaction was very different. To them, this was normal. Species rose. Species expanded. And sometimes, they crossed lines they didn't even know existed. When that happened, stronger powers corrected them. Harshly. Decisively. Without apology. The fleet that destroyed Epsilon 9 belonged to one such power. An empire old enough to remember when most civilizations were still discovering fire. To them, humanity was new. Unpredictable. Expanding too fast. A problem. And problems were dealt with. The message was not meant to start a war. It was meant to end one before it began. A warning. A demonstration. A reminder of place. And in the Galactic Council chambers, many leaders quietly agreed it was efficient. Necessary. Expected. But they did not understand humanity. Back on Earth, there were no immediate speeches. No emotional broadcasts. No public outrage from officials. There was only silence. Not confusion. Not fear. Silence. Governments cancelled meetings without explanation. Military networks went dark, switching to closed channels. Civilian broadcasts continued as normal, but behind them, something massive was shifting. Factories that had stood idle for years suddenly powered on. Orbital shipyards lit up, one after another, like stars being born. Old systems, forgotten, locked away, deliberately buried, were quietly reactivated. Across the planet, a single protocol spread through every branch of command. No announcements. No alarms. Just one instruction. Prepare. In homes, people sat in front of their screens, reading the message again and again. Colony removed. 2 simple words. But behind them was everything. Families began checking contact lists. Friends. Relatives. Anyone who had ever mentioned Epsilon 9. Some calls went unanswered. Others never connected. And slowly, the reality began to settle in. They hadn't just destroyed a colony. They had erased people. Real people. Workers who sent money home. Parents who promised they would return one day. Children who had never even seen Earth. Gone. And the ones responsible had announced it like it was nothing. That was the moment the silence on Earth changed. It became something heavier. Something sharper. Because humanity could understand power. They could even understand fear. But what they could not accept was indifference. And far above a dead world, the alien fleet remained in place. Calm, confident, completely unaware that their message had not ended anything. It had just begun something far worse. At first, the public only knew what they had seen. A message. Cold. Simple. Final. Colony removed. But humanity does not live on words alone. It lives on memories. Within hours, unofficial data began to leak. Not from the government, at least, not directly. Fragments. Broken transmissions. Partial recordings recovered from damaged satellites near Epsilon 9. Someone, somewhere, released them. And once they were out, they could not be contained. The first clip was only 6 seconds long. A shaky recording from a maintenance drone. A city skyline in the distance. Calm. Quiet. Then a flash, bright enough to turn night into day. The camera cut out before the shockwave hit. The second clip was worse. An emergency shelter feed. Dozens of people inside. Workers, families, children. The sound of distant impacts shaking the walls. Someone trying to reassure everyone. Then, silence. The feed ended abruptly. No screams. No final words. Just gone. More followed. Fragments of lives interrupted. A half-written message, "We see ships in orbit, this isn't." A child laughing in the background of a recording that never finished. A final system alert repeating over and over, "Evacuation failure. Evacuation failure." These weren't just images. They were proof. Proof that this wasn't a military strike. This wasn't a warning. This was destruction, total and deliberate. Across Earth, people stopped pretending it was distant. Because suddenly, it wasn't. Epsilon 9 wasn't just a name anymore. It had faces, voices, stories. A miner in Manchester recognized his brother in one of the clips. A woman in London saw her daughter's name on a lost contact list. A school in Birmingham held a quiet assembly when they realized one of their former students had been there. The distance between Earth and that colony collapsed in an instant. It wasn't out there anymore. It was here. And humanity takes things personally. Protests didn't erupt. There were no riots. No chaos. Instead, something far more unsettling happened. People went quiet. Shops stayed open. Transport kept running. Daily life continued. But underneath it all, there was a shift. Conversations grew shorter. Voices lower. Eyes harder. Grief spread first. Then anger. Not loud anger. Not wild or uncontrolled. Cold anger. Focused. The kind that doesn't fade. On social networks, one phrase began to appear again and again. They didn't even warn them. It spread faster than any official statement. Faster than any news report. Because it was true. No warning. No chance. No mercy. And that mattered more than anything. In the upper levels of government, leaders watched the same footage as everyone else. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Every person in that room understood what had just happened. Not just the attack, but the reaction it was creating. This wasn't panic. This wasn't fear. This was unity. The dangerous kind. Because when humanity unites like this, it doesn't stop halfway. Orders began moving faster now. Not louder. Not more visible. Just faster. Fleet movements increased. Production lines doubled. Strategic maps updated in real time. Still, no public announcement was made. No declaration. No threat. Just preparation. Far beyond Earth, the alien fleet remained in orbit above the dead colony. Unmoving. Unchallenged. Certain of their superiority. Certain of their message. They believed they had taught humanity a lesson. They believed it was over. But they had misunderstood one crucial thing. Humans don't forget. And they don't forgive when there's nothing left to forgive for. For decades, humanity had played by the rules. Carefully, quietly. They expanded slowly, negotiated often, and avoided conflict whenever possible. To the rest of the galaxy, humans were acceptable. Not powerful. Not weak. Just another growing species trying to find its place. That was exactly what humanity wanted them to believe. Because hidden behind treaties and diplomacy, something else had been growing. Something the galaxy had never noticed. Deep within Earth's orbit, far beyond civilian traffic, the first shipyard activated. Then another. And another. Massive structures, long dormant, lit up one by one, their cold frames glowing with renewed power. Automated systems came online. Assembly lines began to move. No announcements were made. No signals broadcast. But across the void, something impossible was taking shape. Warships. Not the kind humanity had shown before. These were different. Larger. Heavier. Built not for defense, but for absolute destruction. Some designs dated back years, created during humanity's earliest fears of the unknown. Others were newer, improved, refined in silence. All of them had one purpose. If war ever came, end it quickly. On Mars, underground factories began producing weapons at full capacity. On Luna, defense platforms shifted their orientation, not towards Earth, but outward. In deep space, hidden docks opened, revealing ships that had never been registered, never been seen, never even been acknowledged. Humanity hadn't been idle. It had been preparing. Not for a specific enemy, but for a moment like this. Back on Earth, military command centers operated without pause. Officers moved calmly between stations, issuing orders in low, steady voices. No panic. No rush. Everything had already been planned. That was the most unsettling part. This wasn't a reaction. It was a response. Across secure channels, a single directive spread through every branch of command. No delays. No hesitation. Execute. And slowly, the fleet began to gather. At first, it was just a few ships leaving orbit. Then more joined them. Then entire formations. From different planets, different stations, different sectors, they all moved towards a single point. Silent. Precise. Unstoppable. To an outside observer, it would have looked impossible. Humanity simply didn't have this many ships. Didn't have this level of coordination. Didn't have this kind of power. But the observer would have been wrong. Because for years, humanity had hidden its true strength, not out of fear, but out of caution. The galaxy was unpredictable, dangerous, and humans had learned early on. It was better to be underestimated. Now, that advantage was gone, and humanity no longer needed it. Far away, above the ruins of Epsilon 9, the alien fleet still held position. They had not moved since the attack. To them, there was no threat, no urgency, no reason to leave. They had delivered their message. And in their minds, the matter was closed. Long-range sensors detected minor activity within human space. Fleet movement, energy spikes, increased production. But it was dismissed. Too slow, too late, insignificant. After all, what could one young species really do against an empire that had stood for centuries? The answer was already on its way. And by the time they realized it, there would be no time left to react. They didn't announce their arrival. There was no warning signal. No grand message sent across the stars. One moment, the alien fleet hung silently above Epsilon 9. The next, human ships were there. They came out of jump space like shadows tearing through reality itself. Silent, sudden, and far too close. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. For the first time since the destruction of the colony, the alien fleet moved. Not to attack. To understand. Sensors flared to life, scanning the incoming force. Energy readings spiked across every channel. Command signals were exchanged rapidly between alien ships, their calm precision breaking for the first time. This wasn't a patrol. This wasn't a defensive response. This was a war fleet. And it had arrived without hesitation. At the center of the human formation, one ship moved slightly ahead of the rest. Larger than the others. Darker. Its surface seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, as if space itself bent slightly around it. No markings. No signals. Just presence. The alien fleet attempted communication. A standard protocol. Unidentified human vessels. You are entering restricted. The transmission cut off. Not jammed. Not blocked. Ignored. For a brief moment, everything went still. Two fleets, facing each other across the ruins of a dead world. Then the human ship transmitted a single line. No emotion. No anger. Just truth. You were warned. The alien commanders didn't understand. There had been no warning. Not from them. Not from humanity. But the meaning became clear a second later. The first human shot wasn't a missile. It wasn't a beam. It was something far worse. A pulse. Invisible to the eye, but devastating in effect. It hit the outer edge of the alien formation, and instantly, 5 ships went dark. Not damaged. Not destroyed. Dead. Every system shut down at once. Power. Weapons. Life support. Gone. Their massive hulls drifted helplessly. Silent tombs in the void. The alien fleet reacted immediately. Weapons powered up. Shields flared into existence. Ships began to reposition, breaking their static formation for the first time. But they were already too late. The second strike came without delay. This time, it was visible. A line of pure white light cut across space. Clean, precise, unstoppable. It passed through 3 alien ships as if they weren't even there. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ships split apart. Perfectly. Silently. Gone. Panic spread through the alien ranks. Not loud, not chaotic, but real. Because this wasn't how battles were supposed to work. There were supposed to be exchanges, defenses, time to react. This was execution. Human ships moved forward as one, their formation tightening, their movements perfectly synchronized. No wasted motion. No hesitation. Every shot fired had purpose. Every target chosen with precision. This wasn't anger. This was control. Cold. Exact. Final. The alien fleet returned fire. Beams of energy, waves of plasma, missiles tearing through the void. But the human ships didn't scatter. They didn't retreat. They advanced. Shields absorbed impacts that should have shattered them. Countermeasures neutralized incoming strikes before they could land. And through it all, the formation held. Unbreakable. Above the ruins of Epsilon 9, the battle had begun. But it wasn't a battle in the way the galaxy understood. Because one side was still trying to fight. The other had already decided the outcome. The alien fleet had faced war before. They had crushed rebellions, erased rising species, and enforced their rule across dozens of systems. Their commanders were experienced, calculated, efficient. But nothing had prepared them for this. Because this wasn't war as they understood it. This was something far worse. From the very beginning, they realized one terrifying truth. They couldn't escape. The moment the human fleet arrived, something else had activated. Something hidden, something silent. A field. It spread across the entire system like an invisible net, locking space itself into place. Jump drives failed instantly. Navigation systems flickered and died. Every attempt to retreat ended the same way. Nowhere to go. Nowhere to run. The alien commanders issued new orders. Tighten formation, concentrate fire, break through the human line. It was a logical response. Against any other enemy, it might have worked. But humans had anticipated it. As the alien ships grouped together, human vessels adjusted their positions with perfect timing, herding them, controlling their movement without ever fully surrounding them. Like predators guiding prey. Then came the next phase. Human ships didn't just fire anymore. They hunted. Small, fast attack craft broke from the main formation, weaving through the battlefield with impossible precision. They struck key targets, engines, weapon systems, shield generators, crippling ships instead of destroying them outright. Disabling, isolating, separating. Each alien vessel was cut off from the others, stripped of coordination, reduced to a single, vulnerable unit. And then, the larger ships moved in. There was no rush, no wasted energy, just methodical destruction. One by one, alien ships went dark. Some were sliced apart by beams so precise they looked almost surgical. Others were torn open by concentrated fire that ignored shields completely, as if they weren't even there. A few tried to fight until the end. They charged. They fired everything they had. They refused to surrender. It didn't matter. They disappeared all the same. Inside the alien command ships, something unfamiliar began to spread. Not confusion. Not anger. Fear. Because they were starting to understand. This wasn't revenge driven by emotion. This wasn't a species lashing out in grief. This was something colder. Humanity had already processed its anger. What remained was judgment. A final transmission was sent from the alien flagship. Desperate, urgent. We will withdraw. Hostilities can end. No reply came. Because for humanity, the time for negotiation had already passed. Above the broken remains of Epsilon 9, the battlefield grew quieter. Not because the fighting had stopped, but because there was less and less left to fight. Burning debris drifted where fleets once stood. Silent hulls floated where crews had lived. The vast alien force that had arrived with absolute confidence was collapsing. And still, the human fleet advanced. Unstoppable. Unforgiving. Precise. There were no cheers. No victory signals. No celebration. Just completion. Because this was never about winning. It was about making sure something like Epsilon 9 could never happen again. And as the last organized resistance from the alien fleet began to fall apart, one truth became painfully clear. This wasn't a battle for survival. This was a lesson. And humanity was making sure it would never be forgotten. By the time the last alien ship stopped transmitting, the battle was already over. Not officially, not declared, but in every way that mattered, the outcome was decided. The once powerful fleet now drifted in pieces across the void. Some ships were nothing more than broken shells. Others still held together, dark and lifeless, their crews long gone. Only one remained active. The flagship. It had stayed back during most of the fight, commanding, observing, calculating. Even now, it still had power. Still had weapons. Still had hope. That was its final mistake. The human fleet did not rush it. They slowed down. Every ship adjusted its position, forming a wide circle around the lone survivor. Not tight enough to seem desperate. Not loose enough to allow escape. Controlled. Measured. Inevitable. Inside the alien flagship, the command crew worked frantically. Systems were failing one by one. External sensors showed nothing but human vessels in every direction. No gaps. No weakness. No way out. Open a channel, their commander ordered. This time, the transmission wasn't proud. It wasn't cold. It wasn't a warning. It was uncertain. We acknowledge your strength. This conflict can still end. State your terms. For the first time since arriving, humanity responded immediately. But it wasn't a fleet-wide signal. It came from the same ship that had spoken before, the dark vessel at the center of everything. Its message was short, clear, final. There were no terms on Epsilon 9. Silence followed. Heavy. Unavoidable. Because both sides understood what that meant. The alien commander tried again, voice tighter now. That action was enforcement of. The human response cut in before they could finish. 200,000 civilians. No anger. No raised tone. Just fact. And facts are harder to argue with than threats. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then the human fleet acted. Not with chaos. Not with overwhelming fire. But with precision so exact, it felt deliberate beyond comprehension. Targeting systems locked onto the flagship. Not its weapons, not its engines, but its structure. Key points along its massive frame. A single command passed through the human fleet. And they fired. Multiple beams struck at once. Perfectly aligned, perfectly timed. They didn't explode. They didn't tear wildly. They cut. Clean lines of light slicing through the flagship's hull from multiple angles. The structure held for a moment, as if refusing to accept what was happening. Then it gave way. Sections separated. Systems failed. Power died. The largest ship in the alien fleet came apart in silence. No dramatic explosion. No final attack. Just the slow, inevitable collapse of something that had once believed itself untouchable. As the wreckage drifted, the human fleet did something unexpected. They didn't leave. Instead, they transmitted. Not just to the battlefield. Not just to nearby systems. But across every known communication channel in the galaxy. A single message. Simple. Impossible to ignore. This was Epsilon 9. And with it, they sent the evidence. The recordings. The destruction. The truth. Unfiltered. Unedited. Unforgettable. Across the galaxy, species watched in silence. Leaders. Citizens. Empires. All of them saw what had happened to the colony. And all of them saw what humanity had done in return. No exaggeration. No threats. Just reality. And in that moment, something shifted. Because this was no longer about one destroyed world. This was a statement. Clear. Final. Written in fire and silence. Humanity had not just responded. They had drawn a line. And this time, everyone understood exactly where it was. When it was over, humanity didn't celebrate. There were no victory parades. No speeches. No announcements claiming triumph. Because this had never been about victory. It was about answering something that could not be ignored. Above Epsilon 9, the human fleet remained for several hours after the final transmission. Not to fight. Not to search for survivors. There were none. They stayed. To finish what had been started. Recovery ships moved carefully through the debris field, collecting fragments of human technology, scanning for any trace of data, any record, any memory that could be preserved. Every piece mattered. Because Epsilon 9 would not be forgotten. Not as a statistic. Not as a loss. But as a warning. When the last operation was complete, the fleet began to move. Not in haste. Not in fear. But with the same calm precision they had shown since the beginning. They left the system exactly as they had entered it. Silent, controlled, and unstoppable. Behind them, the wreckage of the alien fleet remained. Untouched. Uncollected. A graveyard in orbit. A message written without words. And across the galaxy, that message spread. No one questioned it. No one challenged it. Because everyone had seen the truth. They had seen what happened to Epsilon 9. And they had seen what happened to those responsible. For the first time in a long time, the galaxy grew quiet. Expansion slowed. Borders were respected. And humanity was no longer underestimated. Back on Earth, life continued. Shops reopened fully. Cities moved as they always had. People returned to work, to school, to their routines. But something had changed. Not visibly, not loudly, but deeply. Because now, everyone understood something they hadn't before. Humanity was not the strongest species. Not the oldest. Not the most advanced. But it was something far more dangerous. It cared. And when you destroy what humans care about, they don't forget. They don't negotiate. And they don't stop. Somewhere, in a quiet part of Earth, a memorial was built. No grand design. No towering structure. Just names. 200,000 of them. Every single life lost on Epsilon 9. People visited in silence. Not to mourn loudly, but to remember. Because memory is where humanity's strength truly begins. And far beyond Earth, among the stars, that lesson remained. Unspoken. Unchallenged. Permanent. The galaxy had drawn lines for centuries. Rules. Limits. Warnings. But now, there was a new understanding. If you cross humanity, there will be no second chance. If you enjoyed this story and want more HFY content like this, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for the next one.